Please Don't Kill Me by Lu Phương Lan. It is a somber day. I have come to visit the place where I left this world 8 years ago. The decrepit yellow building still sleeps underneath the foliage of oak trees that shadow the street. A towering steel fence wraps around a big courtyard. At the entrance lies a gate with 2 heavy wooden doors that only close after 9 p.m. During the day, these doors remain wide open to welcome the undulation of people in and out. Attached to the gates are 2 square posts, each etched with a Red Cross symbol. And overhead, a large, dark blue, rectangular board with white letters read, Obstetrics and Gynecology Hospital. Yes, this is the place. This is the place where pregnant women come to either give life or bring death to their unborn child. There are those fortunate babies who will be born, and there are others who will be murdered inside their mother's womb. I am one of the latter. 8 years ago, I died a cruel and agonizing death. They ruthlessly pulled me from my mommy's womb, carelessly throwing me into a cold aluminum basin. Knives and scissors slashed against my skin, violently crushing my bones. My body writhed with pain, which I struggled to endure for a few minutes before finally surrendering to my death. At that time, I heard a murmuring of voices. The fetus looks more mature. It's at least 1 kilogram, reported one of them. Yes, it was left too late, commented another with some concern. It should have been aborted earlier. Does it look like a boy or a girl? Another asked curiously. It's a girl, came the reply. And then in a panic, oh my gosh, she's not dead yet. Look, the heart is still beating. Oh, don't worry, ladies, came a casual voice. Just don't look. Anyone who looks will be captured by the fetus's soul. Amitabha Buddha, laughed another. And then to the fetus, we're not adversaries. Please don't come for our souls. Reincarnate in your next life, little baby, and maybe you'll have a better life than this one. There was a burst of giggling from the others that followed, and then came a stern voice. Get back to work, it's late. They continued to make light and joke merrily, as this was just another scenario they were all too accustomed to. Laying in the basin, I panted for a few moments longer before taking my last breath. Blood from my body gushed through my severed umbilical cord, and I felt the weight of my body lessen and lessen. Lighter and lighter, I felt as if a pair of translucent wings lifted me from my body, and slowly, gradually, I felt my own body becoming invisible altogether. After one's death, the soul leaves the body and becomes obscure from those who are still living on earth. The soul becomes invisible, but it is nevertheless still able to see and understand the world around it. And there I saw my mommy laying on the gurney as they were about to transfer her to the recovery room. And there I also saw my own body inside the basin, tiny, bruised, and flooded by a pool of blood. The placenta that had once been the connection between my mother and I was also there. It now separated us. At that time, I also saw the nurses washing and sanitizing the operating room. They were preparing for another case of yet another unfortunate child. How many babies each day are so unfortunate as to be murdered this way? The tiny, delicate bodies of these aborted babies would be trashed in the same repulsive mounds of arms and legs severed in fatal accidents, along with those from deathly diseases, the cyanotic livers, the edematous and putrid intestines, and the cancerous tumors. And these same vile masses of human flesh would produce a rank so odious that they would cause those passing by to squeamishly hold their noses in disgust. I did not want to witness any more and flew away in sorrow. But my heart wrenched tearfully. Those tiny infants would die without being buried. Where would their souls go then? Not knowing where to go, I roamed aimlessly, here and there, and mixed and mingled with those who were still alive. I stood right next to them, but they were oblivious to it. And as such, truths would be inadvertently revealed. For instance, once I heard some people plotting an illegal activity. It was one of the secrets that I knew, that those who were alive were completely unaware of. There would be other times when I would enjoy traveling to different places just to enjoy the beautiful sceneries there. Once, I flew past a secluded beach and stopped to listen to the sounds of the lapsing waves. And there, I also saw a couple kissing on the beach. I stood right next to them, but they were unaware. The girl was 16 or 17 years old, and the boy was no more than 20. They were a young couple who were deeply in love and were enjoying the beautiful views on that isolated beach. As they sat there, watching the sun slowly set against the horizon of the water, the boy courted the girl with the sweetness of his words. I stood there and continued to eavesdrop on their conversation, quietly smiling. Love was so beautiful and so romantic. Darkness now prevailed, and gusts of wind became more and more powerful as the sounds of waves crashing against the rocks could be heard. The young couple then stood up, and hand in hand they walked towards a nearby hotel. I followed closely behind and could tell that the innocent girl's bashful demeanor hinted that it was the first time she was engaged in such a dangerous and risky situation. Now, they were standing at the hotel front doors. The room was warm, and intimate. The full moon outside was bright, contrasting with the dimness of the room inside. The sound of music was lulling gently when the young girl stood at the doorway and suddenly and nervously began to have reservations about continuing further. I rushed to stand between the young girl and her lover and whispered some words of advice. "That's right, don't enter. If you do, you'll regret it." I hastily added, Go home now. Your parents are waiting and are worried." Yet the couple stood still. "Young lovers," I continued to strongly forewarn both, "young love is only beautiful if you keep it pure. Unless you decide to get married, please stop. Do not walk into the grave footsteps of my parents." But my words were like whispers in the wind. No one heard. I spoke louder, but it was futile. After several more attempts, it was still a dismal failure, and I gave up. The incident of the young lovers at the hotel took me back more than 10 years ago, when my own mommy and daddy were young in medical school. They lived in different states, but had met and fell in love during school. Indeed, they had a long academic itinerary ahead, albeit their future was a promising one. Mommy and Daddy were in love for many years, their love becoming even more intimate as time went by. Then one rainy and windy night, Daddy visited Mommy at her apartment. He stayed there and did not leave. And right at that night, I came into life, to which my parents were incredulous about my conception. Laying inside the warmth of Mommy's womb, my every breath was dependent upon Mommy's own breath. My every heartbeat was dependent upon the rhythm of my Mommy's own heartbeat. I was just happy and content to be nurtured in such a calm and peaceful environment. I thought that Mommy was just as grateful and that she was just as elated that the life for me inside was a very creation of my own Mommy. I also felt a spiritual bond between Mommy and I loved my Mommy even more so. Inside Mommy's womb, I knew everything. I know each time my parents walked along the beach together and could smell the salty ocean air through my Mommy's own breath. I could hear the birds chirping. I could hear the lapsing of the waves. I could also feel the warmth of the sun's rays permeating through my Mommy's belly, thin skin. As my parents strolled along, enjoying the beautiful sceneries, I heard Daddy affectionately tell Mommy, "Sweetheart, look!" I tried to imagine what my father was pointing to. I tried to imagine the open, soaring skies. I tried to imagine the valleys. I tried to imagine the vast fields of wildflowers and the brooks and the hills and the birds above. But alas, I could not. I was only a fetus whose vision was yet to develop. Nevertheless, I knew this world was a beautiful one, and I yearned for the day that I would be born into it. was 3 months old when Mommy told Daddy about me. I was anxious to hear what Daddy would say. But unlike what I would have thought, Daddy was not happy. He seemed to be worried instead. And my parents had a heated argument. My father then said, "I don't want the baby. It's not time." There was a moment of silence, and I heard Mommy sobbing quietly before Daddy whispered, "How far along are you?" 3 months. 3 months, huh? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Because I wanted to be sure before I told you. The results were just confirmed yesterday. It's okay. It's not too late. There's still time. Time for what? Mommy's voice was quivering. What else can we do but abort? Abortion? Mommy gave a shrill cry of fear, and likewise did my own heart stop beating for a moment. Daddy wants to kill me? That's cold and heartless, Mommy affirmed. It's not even a baby yet, Daddy spoke in a casual tone. He was calm and matter-of-fact, as if he was dissecting a formaldehyde-soaked cadaver in medical school. Right now, it's only an embryo. It's maybe 5 centimeters long and maybe 100 grams in weight. Oh, it's as big as, and looks like a fertilized duck egg. Shut up! You're a cold and heartless human being. The following day, my parents continued to argue. Mommy would cry, Daddy would beg and plead. Then he would become enraged with anger, and then he would continue to convince Mommy. If we have the baby now, one of us will need to quit school. Would all our hard work and efforts to pass the exam and be accepted to medical school be poured down the river? Would it all be thrown out to the sea simply because of a baby? What's more, how would we even have the money to feed it? We are only students who have not even graduated yet. We don't even have a career in our hands. Mommy bowed her head and sighed exasperatingly. Her countenance was sad, and I began to panic. Mommy, say something. Is it possible that you're actually agreeing? No matter what, I will still definitely keep it, Mommy resisted feebly. God created all living things. And besides, whoever died of starvation? There's always lower paying jobs available. There are plenty of those. It's your decision, miss, Daddy began angrily. If you want to make the decision yourself, then you can go ahead and take care of it yourself. Daddy stormed off angrily as Mommy looked at him with hatred. She cried until there were no more tears. In subsequent days, Mommy was plagued with so much worry, anxiety, and torment that she was unable to eat nor sleep. Coupled with her morning sickness, Mommy was thinned with weight loss. After 3 months had passed, I was growing quickly and required Mommy to be in maternity clothes. It embarrassed her and shamed her, leading Mommy to avoid others, while her emotional psyche was low and sunken. A few weeks after, Daddy came back with one last-ditch effort to convince Mommy. Sweetheart, it's your decision if you want to give up an optimistic future as an affluent physician. If you want to trade that future with one seeking lowly blue-collar work, then it is your prerogative. But how can you give honor to your family? How can your parents bear the thought of having a wild child for a daughter who is unmarried and pregnant? Then why don't the two of us get married? Mommy resolved innocently. You still tell me that you love me and will make me your wife, and I believe you. This baby is a result of the union of our love. No, it is more correct to say that it was a result of a mistake. And the circumstances just aren't right for us to get married. So let's just forget it and let all pass. No regrets. It's just one child. How hard can it be to conceive one child? After this, after we graduate from school, we'll get married, and then you can have as many children as you want. Mommy looked as if she was backing down and ready to surrender to the idea. And so my fate was determined. I must die. I was going to die a death that was considered agreeable and allowed by law. But how about the conscience? My God, don't people have a conscience? They quickly prepared for my death. Because I was now over 4 months old, the longer they waited, the harder it would be to kill me. So the hospital set up the appointment for Mommy within just 10 more days. And I desperately opposed by kicking Mommy with as much force as I could. I was reminding her that I was alive, that I was a human being, and that I demand the right to live. Yet my attempts were feeble, as I was really just a mere 4-month-old fetus. My kicks only caused a light rumbling within Mommy's womb. Nevertheless, Mommy did feel me kicking inside of her. She looked down, rubbed her stomach, and whispered to me, "I'm sorry, my child, but I have no other choice. Please, forgive Mommy." "No!" I shrieked. "Killing another human being is unforgivable. I will not forgive you nor Daddy." I sobbed and pleaded, "I don't want to die. I beg you, Mommy, please don't kill me." My pleading was pointless. So they were only concerned about the family's honor and were only concerned about their wealth more than about a human life, and everything was already set. The hospital would be the beginning chapter of my death. On that fateful day, Daddy had disappeared in hiding, and Mommy went to the hospital alone. The closer Mommy neared the hospital, the slower her walking pace became, and the more I continued to shout, "Mommy, turn around, don't go in, I beg you, please, don't go in." But Mommy hesitantly carried on. From the front entrance, through the open hall, was the abortion room, the room where the murder would take place. It was only a short distance to get there, yet Mommy was short of breath. Was it fear or regret that was causing her to hesitate? Mommy took each step with great difficulty, and with every step, she paused, giving me some glimpse of hope. But at last it was only despair as Mommy stood in front of the abortion room. And this was where Mommy would cut all ties with me as she brought me there to kill me. And my heart seemed to stop beating as Mommy outstretched her hand to knock gently on the door. There was a moment of suffocating silence, and then the door opened widely to a room filled with people wearing white coats. 2 nurses came to greet us, holding Mommy's hand as they led us inside. Mommy followed robotically. Her tears of remorse were already dried as she bent her face downward. She avoided looking at anyone. They helped Mommy lay down on the operating table as the doctors were preparing to put on their surgical gloves. In that moment, my blood seemed frozen at the horrific event before me. I kicked and kicked vehemently, meanwhile shouting, "Stay away! Stop this murdering! I beg you, let me live!" But the anesthesia was already given to Mommy. She was already sedated, but I was still aware and awake to see the shiny surgical knives and tools. I trembled with fear as these same murder weapons aimed at me. From the moment when life passes on to death was one too horrific and frightening to even describe. But I would never, ever forget the manner in which I had died. In the world of spirits thereafter, I met other souls who had recently passed away. I also met other souls like myself who were yet to be freed and who were still wandering aimlessly like I was. And I wandered into a temple and into a church. I wandered into a school where I sat next to a few students, but no one saw me. I even went inside a theater and even mixed amongst the social crowd. In this world of spirits, I went to play inside a cemetery. There was a winding red dirt road there, where gusts of wind would blow dirt everywhere, obscuring the way. The gusts of wind would also send dried leaves to chase each other around the 2 rows of desolate willow trees as they stood underneath the afternoon sun. The sun was setting in the west, and the last remnants of daylight were slowly dissipating, casting shadows parallel to the rows of tombstones. The somberness of a cemetery was that much more apparent. I could see a crowd of people standing there before a grave that was freshly covered. The soil was still wet with moisture, and the smoke still emitted from the incense. The crowd was preparing to depart for home. Their eyes were reddened from crying, while their heads were wrapped with bandanas worn by mourners. Ah, so this was a funeral of one who was just buried, I quietly observed. Covering the tombstone were flowers, many, many flowers. I wondered if that person must have been so very loved to have received such an abundance of flowers upon that person's death. Or was it only because the person was from a wealthy family who was wanting an extravagant funeral service? Who knows? The family members then left through the front gates, while I went the opposite direction and entered deeper inside the cemetery. Sporadically, throughout the various other tombstones, fresh flowers were present, indicating recent visits from others. I could differentiate between those tombstones that were meticulously attended to versus those that were deserted and left to a sprouting of wild weeds. There were tombstones that were very grand and very majestic, and contrarily, there were others that were simple rectangular shapes of cement with a crucifix on top. I sighed. Whether the tombstone was extravagant or simple, the person buried below would nevertheless eventually turn to dust. The body would not be there forever to admire their own grave anyways. The sky had grown darkened, spreading its blanket of darkness over the land. Visitors had gone home by now, and there wasn't a single shadow of a person around the cemetery. I walked between the graves and looked up into a darkened purple sky where stars were twinkling like diamonds above. The moon had just peeked through the treetops, illuminating its light upon the earth. And then I leaned down and peered at the dead bodies lying in the graves below. This body had just been buried. The flesh was already rotten and pale white, but clothes were still intact and had not yet decomposed. All the other bodies that were buried a long time ago looked similar. The gray skeletons, the 2 eye sockets in the head area, the teeth jutting forward. And they were all sunken beneath the blackened mud, sooner or later to be crawling with maggots. I saw a body with long hair that indicated it was a female. After death, perhaps the skeleton and the hair of a person are the last to disintegrate. But when this person was alive years ago, was she beautiful? Was she ugly? How would anyone know? I tried to discern between the corpses that were once people of high intellect with those that were once illiterate, but there were no differences. I also tried to discern between the corpses that were once people of affluence with those that were once destitute, but there were still no differences. Upon death, the accumulation of wealth, fortune, and fame are all nulled and voided, and everyone becomes equalized to one another. Every tangible dollar earned when people are alive becomes meaningless upon death, as death enables nothing material to be taken along. Yet when people are alive, they are driven by such competition, tearing each other apart and committing cruel acts in the pursuit of material greed. Daddy was just like this. He was more than willing and ready to destroy whatever it was that stood in his way, in an effort to get one step further to wealth and prestige. And indeed, Daddy had achieved this. Indeed, he basked in his riches. But it wouldn't stop there. The vigorous desire to achieve more would continually force him to push forth even further. And it was pitiful for Daddy to live a life of stress and hardship where his mind was never at rest, just so he could achieve such unworthy and meaningless goals. I had forgotten to mention that Daddy's curtain wife would not turn out to be my mom. After this incident, my parents became distant to one another, and it wasn't long until my dad married another young girl who came from an affluent family and from whom my father was given an enormous dowry. And Mommy despised the man she once loved and was so tormented by this that it made her very sick and almost drove her insane for quite some time. After she regained her health, though, Mommy had no recollection of everything that had happened in the past. Perhaps this was good, though, because then she wouldn't need to suffer from the pain of long ago. Thereafter, Mommy shaved her head and became a monk. She dressed in the brown robe of a monk and would practice the chants of the Buddha's prayers in an attempt to find some peace for her soul. Mommy was distancing herself from life and was dissociating from the daily rigors and hardships that life had brought upon. I despondently sighed, not wanting to think about it anymore. It was getting late, and the insects and other creatures of the night were synchronizing in their evening song. Meanwhile, up above, the moon shone brightly, hinted by the fragrance of jasmine and laurel flowers all around. It was a peaceful and beautiful evening, albeit a very sad one for those who were lost and forlorn in life. I lingered in the moonlight, observing the glow that cast it against the tombstones. It was really the reaction of the phosphorus evaporated from the cadavers and the oxygen in the air that would emit a light that people would believe as ghosts. This would then be the reason that caused people to fear ghosts, fearing visits to cemeteries at night and fearing those who have died in general. It was peculiar, though, to think that when those dead bodies lying in the graves were once alive, everyone had their families, everyone had someone to love, and they all lived together under the same household. Everyone ate, slept, and went about their business together. Yet when there was a death, people would suddenly become afraid of their own deceased family member. It was just a strange concept to me. A leaf then fell, interrupting my train of thought. I looked up and saw a blonde little girl with a pair of beautiful pink wings sitting on the tombstone, singing. I wasn't sure how long she had been there. She was very little, though, probably no more than 2 years of age. But compared to me as a 5-month-old fetus, the little girl was nevertheless much bigger. When she saw me, she smiled and came near. "Come closer, little girl." "I'm Emily. What is your name?" "I don't have a name," I replied. "Why not?" The little girl with round blue eyes surprisingly inquired. "Everyone must have a name for others to call them by." "But not me," I sadly told her, "because I've never actually been born." The little girl then shook her head back and forth, swaying her curly hair. She didn't seem to understand, but I didn't want to taint her innocence, so felt it unnecessary to give her the details. We both sat in silence, watching the moon together. I suddenly remembered something in my mind and asked, "Where did you come from?" "I'm here, from heaven. I came to visit my family today, on the anniversary of the day that I had died. Then I came here to play," Emily had begun. "What is a death anniversary?" I curiously asked. "It's a day when others remember the death of someone," Emily shared. "Family members gather together, prepare a meal, and light incenses to remember and pray for the person who has died." Really? I wondered, surprised. But I've died 8 years ago. How come no one has ever remembered nor prayed for me? Neither has anyone ever lit an incense for me, nor has ever lit a candle for me. People forget stories that have already passed long ago, and they would believe this to be something of minor significance. Life is so very busy, and people are only worried about food and clothing and about other pleasures in life. Who would have time to think about the babies that they have killed? People have probably already forgotten that it was their own hands who had killed these babies in the first place. Noticing that I was standing there in a daze, Emily then asked, "When are you coming back to heaven?" "I'm not sure." I finished with a goodbye. It was just past midnight. The moon had vanished, with the dew dampening the trees and the grass. A lone bird cried aloud as it flew on by. Everyone was deep asleep at this hour, and I wandered about aimlessly in the moistened air of the night, unsure of where to go. But the night was slowly dissipating as the sun began to peep through the eastern horizon. The morning sun was slowly emerging as another day would soon begin. Whenever I was saddened, I often went in search of friends who were similar situations as I was. We'd meet in groups and wandered off together and would look for the glow of burning incenses to help warm us. One Christmas, my friends and I followed along with a group of people attending church service. There, the church was crowded and full of cheer. I saw a statue of baby Jesus inside a manger. It was surrounded by the Virgin Mary, along with other saints and shepherds. Up in the night sky, the stars shone and sparkled as the angels with white wings flew about, singing and rejoicing in the birth of Jesus Christ. And inside the church, the priest was robed in holiday wear. The choir was preparing for midnight mass, and the parishioners were kneeling at the pews. When the church bell rang to celebrate the birth of Jesus, the sound of the choir echoed in unison, followed by the holy prayers that were heard. It was such a sacred atmosphere that we knelt down to pray as well. Jesus, our Savior, and Holy Mary, Mother of God, we pray to you for our salvation. Amen. And then suddenly, I felt so much more peaceful and beyond what I normally felt. Was it through prayer that melted away the coldness within my heart and comforted me so? I looked up, and the statue of the Holy Mary lit up in all her glory, her arms outstretched to give her blessings to all. An overwhelming conviction then surged within me and moved me with emotions, and I respectfully bowed my head in the presence of the Holy Mary. After Christmas, people would then prepare for the arrival of the Lunar New Year. This was the very last day of the year and would be an occasion where everyone in the family would come together. Every home would be illuminated by candles, and the smoke of incenses would be seen on every worshiping altar as well. Everyone would gather together and would be ready to welcome the new year together. But perhaps no one would notice the group of children's souls wandering aimlessly during this time. The sound of firecrackers then exploded, synchronizing with the chiming of bells from the temple as well as from church. People said their farewells to the old year while excitedly welcoming the new year and greeting each other with well wishes. Later, on New Year's Day, people went to church or to temple to pray for an auspicious new year. And this was when I had asked for people to spend just a few minutes to pray for the other babies like myself, who had an unfortunate fate in life. Pray for other babies like myself, who only wanted nothing but to be born, yet were nevertheless killed and left to travel through an unknown path on earth. Please pray for us and free us so we can ascend to heaven. And please pray also to cease this killing, as such babies are nothing but innocent. And that was my hope.
Original story written by Foon Lan Liu. English translation by Carolyn Liu. Narration by Heart B. True.